like, you're too noisy. I said, you don't have to be around me.
Friendship may actually go beyond just relating on a
superficial
basis.
There's the adage that says, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are.
There are some of us who are not very good at regular visit, but because they are friends,
you have to.
In order to maintain that friendship.
The emotional state of the parents is usually directly proportional to the emotional state of the children.
Welcome viewers again to our favorite family show, The Living Room, right here on Equa Television International. My name is Amaka Ocheke, and today again we have something very interesting we want to discuss, and it's something that we wish and we desire that it will propel us to action, not just to think, not just to hear, but to move us to do the things that God has called us to do. So with me here today is a very dear brother and friend of mine. We go back a long way, and he has turned out surprisingly different from what I thought his life would be when we knew ourselves earlier. So I'm here with Mark Kolo. He'll tell us a bit about himself. He's a missionary. He's very passionate about fulfilling the Great Commission and getting people on board to make sure that people make heaven and hell is depopulated. So Mark, over to you. Tell us a bit about yourself. Aside from that, he's a very tall man. Don't mind that he's sitting here, but he's very tall. I know you can see his legs.
You've always made fun of my legs for
because they are long.
Something years now. Well, my name is Mark Kolo, and I come from a family of 4 parents and 4 children. I'm second in the family. I was born here in Jos, but grew up mostly in Lagos for a number of years before we moved back to Jos. I attended ABU, Zaria. I studied industrial design, my first degree, and it was shortly after I left campus that I heard about this thing called missions, and like they say, the rest is history.
All right. You didn't tell us about your family, whether you're married.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. Major omission. My family is made up of 3 children. I'm married to Amina. From the name you can tell she's female. And she's 1. And we have 3 children, 14, 12, and 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now this mission thing, what got you into missions?
I didn't know much about missions all my years growing up, even though my parents worked with SIM Equa, for some time. And my dad had books, always had books around him. I would read a little bit about some SIM missionaries, but as far as I was concerned, that's for old white men that God sent to Africa. Yes. But it was in my 3rd year in university, I rededicated my life to Christ, and I decided to really get serious with my walk with God. And I think that's the first indication, or the first requirement if somebody really wants to walk with God. It's not about what you do, it's about cultivating a living relationship with Him. So I decided to take God more seriously. So the whole of my final year in school, I spent a lot of time alone. I left campus, got a place off campus, so that I could regain my journey with God.
So some people would think you decided to be a big boy. It's big boys that live off campus.
No. It was a simple, modest 1 room, but I really needed space. Not that I was avoiding my friends, but I felt I needed time to think, to pray, to process, and to prepare for my future, which wasn't clear at the time. But then I still had my own plans. Like any young man, I had my own ambitions.
We knew some of those plans.
I know. And but when I went for youth service in Taraba State, I was posted to Taraba State. I didn't want to go because shortly after school, immediately after school, I had things I wanted to do with my life, which I wanted to be either in Jos or Kaduna. I felt like those were the places that I could operate from and make money. but I was posted to Taraba State, and reluctantly I went. But I told myself I'll do 2 weeks of camp and then redeploy. God had other plans. In the course of attending fellowship every day on camp, the Christian Corpus Fellowship, I began to hear about people groups in Taraba State, many of whom had no exposure to the gospel. And that began to bother me. But I've always been a backbencher, largely because of my height. I always felt sitting in front, you could block people, and again, I didn't want exposure.
Too much light on you.
Yes,
You like
I
the
wanted to
limelight.
avoid that. So even in the fellowship, I was always at the back. So while they were talking all these things, yes, my heart was moved, but I felt, okay, those who are more serious, in their work with God than myself, this is the kind of thing they want to do. I want to do 2-3 weeks here and then redeploy back to Jos or Kaduna State. But one night, after a strong challenge had come and somebody was saying, maybe God has posted you here for a reason, for a purpose way bigger than what you know. And that may be to take the gospel to people. I heard the Lord say, why not you? Why other people? Why not you? And so began the process of surrender. It took a while, but eventually I was able to, okay, let me stay back and do 1 year youth service. After that, I'll go back and do my thing. Again, God had other plans. Towards the end of my service here, the call became clearer. Of course, during service here, we're going into some of those rural communities.
Rural rugged.
Yes, doing rural rugged
evangelism,
yes. And that was really an eye-opener. So that was how my journey began into missions.
Okay. So you think that exposure during NYSC was...
It was life-changing for me because this is the tail end of the 20th century, 1998, and I couldn't fathom the reality that there are people in Nigeria who had never heard the gospel. I was in Jos here, comfortable, attending big churches, meeting in comfortable auditorium, and now I'm hearing that there are people who never heard about Jesus. It was hard for me to process, and it was just difficult to accept that there are people who have never heard, because in Jos, there were churches on every street corner, literally.
Everywhere. Some streets even have 2 churches.
Yeah,
well,
some buildings even have...
Jos isn't yet as bad as Lagos or
I know,
Ibadan, Lagos or Abuja, but we're getting there.
There are churches everywhere. So it was a crisis for me. So I began to have this dialogue with God, where I basically almost was accusing God. God, is not fair that there are people who are tucked away on the Mandara Mountains, on Donkin Hills, in these villages in Taraba State, who would never... It's not fair. God said, yeah, it's not fair. I said, then do something about it. And God said, no, you do something about it. He said, I've done my part. I have paid the price. My son has shed his blood. Now it's your part to tell them what I've done for them. And so I had a crisis. What do I do? Here are my ambitions. Here are my plans. My parents had plans for me. But here is a real need, and God is saying, do something about it. So I went through this season, weeks and months, where this was all I could think about. I couldn't imagine, millions of people heading to eternal damnation simply because of where they were born and not having access to the gospel. So it deepened my prayer life, and after a time, I knew God was calling me to go all the way.
Yeah. Okay, you've raised a few things, but I want to put this one, I want to pursue first of all.
Sure.
So, for young people now, how to coin this now? Okay. What are the things that they would need to do, or where would they need to be to really fit, or to find out, first of all, what maybe God's plans for them? Okay. Like on campus, and for those who have gone for youth service, what would you advise?
Well, first and foremost, and most importantly, is your personal walk with God. Because if you don't have a functional relationship with God, then it's difficult to hear Him, even when He's speaking to you, even when He's screaming, it's difficult. So the first thing is to have that in place. Secondly is watch your fellowship. Watch who you commune with. It's not everybody that is seeking first the kingdom. So sometimes we are in places that don't nurture what God may want to do in us. They may actually be stifling it because of what we hear. Much of what you hear determines what you do, or the kind of people you surround yourself with, the company you keep, can shape your convictions and eventually your decisions. So it's good to also watch who you hang out with. Thirdly, I would say watch what you consume. If you spend all your time watching stuff that does not point you towards things that have eternal value, you will squander one life on things that are very temporal, and at the end of time, you really have nothing to show. So the books you read, the movies you watch, the music you listen to, just watch what you consume. Some things, you're a medical doctor, so you know that a woman can lose a pregnancy by reason of some things that she allows.
So,
Right.
so what people consume is very important, because
Extremely.
I know sometimes you talk and young people seem to feel like it doesn't matter. I can do whatever I like. So far as God knows that my heart is in the right place. It's not a big deal.
I wish it didn't matter, but let me give you a typical example from my story. I was at one time in my journey, I joined a fellowship, a church that was good. They were preaching the truth, but they didn't see beyond themselves. It was focused on
Themselves,
growing themselves. At best, growing their denomination, which I wouldn't really call that the mission of God. And so I was, at one point in that fellowship, I was offered the opportunity to be the youth pastor. I won't mention the name of the church
Oh,
because
no need.
we were there together with you. This is more than 20-something years ago. But I knew that if I stayed there, I would still be doing ministry, but it would
wouldn't
not
be-
feed what God had already deposited in me. So I went to a senior friend who was at that time like a mentor, which is the fourth thing I'm going to say. Find godly mentors, people you are accountable to, who have a sense of what God is doing in you and can help guide you or facilitate that journey. So I went to him and I said, I'm in between this decision. I know this is what God has called me to do, but this is an opportunity, but I don't really feel called to pastoral work. Long story short, he gave me one piece of advice because I wanted to leave that church and move on elsewhere. I felt this might stifle the call of God on my life. And he said, I'm not going to tell you which church to go to, but go where the vision in you can be nurtured. Because I'm sorry to say this, but there are some environments, some Christian environments, that kill the vision for God's mission in the heart of God's people.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, young people should be deliberate.
Extremely intentional and
about-
deliberate.
okay.
Yes.
So not just where you find yourself.
No.
Okay. Now, for families, let's go to the family setting. How can families, be involved in this God's call to make sure that everybody hears the gospel before they die or before he returns?
Okay.
I know that it starts from the individual level, but
Yeah.
since we're
Yeah.
into family things,
Yeah.
how can what should we do?
Okay. I think before I go to the what, allow me to start with the why. Why should families be intentional about being involved in the mission of God? If you look at the big picture, starting from Genesis, the family was set up for mission. The family exists for the mission of God. Adam was created, and then he said, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper that is suitable. So Eve was created to help Adam, not to keep him company. Company is good, companionship extremely important, but to help him. To help him do what? A few verses earlier, Adam had been given a mission. He'd been given an assignment. So Eve was to help Adam for that purpose. And of course, when they began to have children, in God's mind is to, because God had said in Genesis 1:28, be fruitful, multiply and fill the earth. So what was God looking for? A race of human beings who are in his image and likeness. But then the mission got aborted. Chapter 3, something went wrong. We don't have time. This is not a preaching session.
No, preach it.
But
Preach it if you want to preach it.
but if you go through the entire Bible, you will see a God who has relentlessly been on a pursuit to get back the original purpose for which he put humans on earth in the first place. You know, he saved creation through a family, Noah's family. Brought creation into the ark, which became like a womb to reproduce the next creation. Of course, which isn't perfect, but God always worked through families. Genesis 18, he came to Abraham. He says, shall I keep a secret from Abraham, seeing that he will command his children and his household after him, that they may keep the commands of God. What God always had in mind for families is that there will be a model on the earth of the family in heaven. And that would attract the nations to know who these people are. But again, we see the nation of Israel, Adam's descendants, failing, sometimes succeeding, attracting nations, sometimes repelling nations because they went into idol worship. So fast forward, Malachi, the last book of the Old Testament, God said in chapter 2, I think verse 15, he said, I desire godly seed. I desire godly seed. When he was saying I hate divorce, he said, I desire godly seed. So this is a word to parents. God didn't give you children for yourself. God gave and gives us children for his purpose. What does godly seed mean? It's not, seed means you don't keep a seed for decoration.
Something for planting.
Yes, many of us give birth to children just to keep looking at them and deriving pleasure from them. That's not good enough. That's the Penina family. I don't want to talk about Penina and her children now. She had many children, but none of them fulfilled purpose. What's the name of Penina's children?
No idea.
We have no idea. Heaven keeps no record of families who don't produce what God wants.
Wow, that's harsh.
It is harsh, but it's the truth. Heaven has no space to record names of people who are out of order and purpose with God's mission. Hannah had a son, and she dedicated him to the mission of God, of reconciling a nation back to him. This was a backsliding nation. God needed a prophet, Hannah needed a son. And as long as she was pleading with God, give me a son, give me a son. See, heaven is not interested in your prayer points if it doesn't connect with heaven's need. But when Hannah said, give me a son, I'll give him to you, God said, now we are in business. Because even when Hannah was praying, I don't believe Hannah was the only barren woman in Israel. There are lots of them. But God is not obligated to answer our prayers just to fulfill our wishes and make us feel good. Our lives, we are created to be in alignment with his priorities. And so when Hannah had a son, she gave him back to God. And it's instructive to note that God didn't promise Hannah more children. She was content, if you give me a son, I'll give him back to you. That is true worship. And then God now gave her more. But it wasn't declared when she was signing the deal.
Yeah.
You know, that that's easy to do. You give me a son, I'll give him to you, then you give me others. Many of us, we are in that transactional relationship with God, which now switches things. We become God. So anyway, women like Hannah, they become heroines for us. People who produce children for God's purpose, godly seed. Another example I like to use is Jochebed, Moses' mother. Picture Pharaoh's daughter giving Moses to Jochebed, not knowing that that's his real mother. Say, nurture him for me. Nurture him for me. What she didn't know was that actually Jochebed was set up to nurture Moses for God. I don't believe that the months or years, I don't know how long, that Jochebed was nurturing Moses, that all she did was breastfeed him and sang him lullabies to sleep. Obviously not. She knew this boy was a child of destiny. She must have been speaking into his life. This is who you are. We are going into into Pharaoh's palace, but this is who you are. I believe that the little time she had, she put something in him that when he now became an adult, it was switched on. It was activated and he could enter into his assignment. So parents need to know that every child that passes through your hands, number one, like Jochebed, like Hannah, recognize you just have a slim window of opportunity to produce godly seed for God's purposes. It's a big error when we think God gives us children so that we can make them who we want them to be. They belong to Him. They're just passing through our hands. And I think it's a failure of parenting. Again, I'm sorry if it sounds harsh.
But it's the truth.
It's a failure. It's the truth. It's a failure of parenting to not produce seed for God's purposes, not for our pleasure, but for His purposes. That's the whole point of parenting.
Okay, so how, you said you are not into family ministry. I've started now. So now how do parents deliberately do what it takes to produce this godly seed for God's purpose?
Thank you. First of all, parents themselves need to know what God is up to.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know the purpose of God, you don't know the agenda, you don't know the big picture, you can't map out, this is what's in the heart of God. I'm not talking about just doing evangelism in the neighborhood. I'm talking about God's grand agenda, God's
big picture.
God's big picture, what the whole scripture is about from Genesis to Revelation, what God is about. Then you can't raise children that will plug into it. So first of all, it starts with the parents. They themselves need to know this is why we are here, and this is why God gives us children. This is why God gives us a job. This is why He gave me a car. This is why I have a business.
Sure, what you are saying, Mark, is that nobody can be an effective parent if you are really not into God.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. God is the first parent.
Yeah. So
and
if you're
the
not,
best. So
if you're and if your commitment to God is wishy-washy, it's not going to work.
It's impossible to, because you are going to be a, what's that family? You are going to be a family that you are having children, but they are totally out of sync with divine agenda. And remember, every human life belongs to Him, and every human life will report to Him. So parents have a very critical role, very important responsibility. First of all, to be in connection with God, and then now to raise children that will follow that path, wherever that leads. So, coming to your question, what do parents do? First of all, themselves. Secondly, there are practical things that every parent can do, should do, to expose their children to a place whereby they can make decisions, number one, that are God-honoring, number two, that have eternal significance, and number three, that have global implications. Why is the third one important? Christian parents need to start raising children that have a global vision. You see, many non-Christian parents are raising children with a global vision. They are doing things, pursuing careers, study opportunities and many of them are trying to do things that will touch other parts of the planet, albeit negatively sometimes. But many Christian parents just want to have children around them. But we need to
take care of us in our old age.
Can you imagine? As if that's insurance, insurance for old age. No.
Oh.
We need parents that live with, first of all, they themselves live with a global vision, and then they can help children, first of all, God-honoring decisions. Secondly, eternal significance. Decisions they make. Every child needs to know that the decisions I make
is not just
for here.
And today.
Yes, it's not just for today. It has implications in eternity. The hereafter, yes. And then, of course, the global vision. The world right now is extremely global, and the church needs to embrace the pursuit of global parenting, global agenda in every area.
So break it down, because when you say global, it's just hanging there. What does that mean?
Let me give a few practical examples.
Yes, it would help us.
Our mutual friend, let me use him as an example, Dr. Sam. Dr. Sam Gara. He's part of this team of Christian doctors
who go to Niger
every December into January for a couple of weeks to relieve some SIM missionaries who need to. So it inspires me every time I have an opportunity to sit with him and hear their stories, because he would take his family along. They would travel across the border and live in a different culture every year for, I think, if I'm not wrong,
for so many years
for
now.
Quite a number of years. So his children are beginning to have an understanding of a culture outside of theirs. they are beginning to interface with communities that are unreached. They are seeing people groups that don't have access to the gospel the way they do back home here in Nigeria. That's one. Parents can help their children grow in global vision by planning short-term mission trips. If you can't go yourself, find a mission agency that you can trust and work with them for a period of time, and your children can volunteer some of their holidays and go on mission trips. Secondly, if you don't want to risk having them go across the border or to a different
Like that,
culture,
those mission trips, I had dreamed that I would do that with my
Yeah,
kids.
okay.
Then all these things started in the far north.
yeah,
Many of the missionaries moved away because I had done that, and I
Okay.
felt it was something my children
yeah.
should experience.
There are other opportunities, other ways of doing it that are not that risky. Okay. Again, the other things
But
that
life is a risk, actually.
life itself is a risk. Just driving from home to work every day is a risk.
Yeah.
And nothing on earth is worth risking one life for other than the gospel. I think the gospel is worth taking. Not careless risks, not, flinging your life in harm's way deliberately because you need to fulfill purpose, but it's worth taking a risk for the gospel because number one, your assignment is at stake. Number two, eternity is at stake for billions of people, and we have the answer.
There was one other example we wanted to give about what to do with your kids to give them a global
Yes.
vision.
Yes. If you don't want to travel or you don't want them to go that far, start at home. Okay? One of the things that we do as a family is that we, early enough, right from when our kids were very little, during family altar, would pray for missions and pray for missionaries. So my wife and I, before the kids were born, we had adopted a couple of missionary families, one in Liberia, one in Djibouti, that we pray for. So our kids were born and grew up knowing that we pray for this
these
family. So they
families.
know the names of the children in that family. They know what's happening in the lives of, like when the missionary family in Liberia send a prayer request about their children. They're about to go back to school. Please pray with us that God will supply what they need. Our children are praying for them. So they are beginning to see that, okay, this is not just about me going to church, being a good Christian, growing old, becoming an elder, and dying. Life has to go beyond you.
So there are things they do that impact.
Yes.
Somewhere, other
somebody
people.
else somewhere. That's what. Other things you can do is books. My children read. We expose them to books, but my daughter particularly loves to read missionary biographies, and so I'm constantly feeding her a steady diet of missionary. But there's one particular one she likes. She has read it like 6 times. I'm even the one telling her now, don't read this one again. There are
Read
others.
some other.
She reads it like she's preparing for an exam for it, because the stories are very inspiring. Now, somebody may be saying, so are you saying all of our children should become missionaries? That's not what I'm saying. But all of our children should become disciples whom Jesus can do whatever he wants at any time.
But going back
Yes.
from what you said, I think everybody should be a missionary, but maybe not a career missionary in that.
Not in
like
the way that, okay, the word missionary right now, there's a lot of debate around it, okay.
who is a
Yeah.
missionary?
My perspective is that if we make genuine disciples from home, God will not lack laborers for his mission. Whether that mission takes them to another culture in a different continent, or it keeps them within their culture in the marketplace, God would have enough usable material. So
what he
parents
needs to do.
need to, and allow me to say this, discipleship programs are good, discipleship ministries are good, but the best place for discipleship to happen is in the home. Mission mobilization is good. A pastor can stand there and cast vision for missions, but the people that are best equipped, best positioned to mobilize laborers for the harvest are parents. But we can miss all that opportunity if we get caught up on doing life and we're trapped in just religious activities, but forgetting that God desires godly seed. Ultimately, marriage and family life, God is watching for godly seed. He's looking for, I need children that will serve my purpose, not your pleasure. And if I am a parent connected to him, my greatest pleasure will be and should be to serve his purpose. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it makes a lot of sense.
so there's a number of other things. One of the things I do, every house we've ever lived with our children, I have a big map somewhere. So they learn about geography, because children just need to see beyond their village or their town, their city,
Yeah.
their country, their continent. Learn about countries. And there are so many things, opportunities for them to relate with children. They don't have to travel, but find. Right now, the world missions is from everywhere to everywhere. It's no longer about leaving one location and going somewhere far, because those who are trying to go and reach in a different location, many of them have moved, and they are living right on our doorsteps. Migration is one of the key issues shaping missions now. So, can we expose our children to people from other cultures who have come near, rather than keeping them in this safe cocoon?
Yeah.
And they grow up Christians, but honestly, the most experience they have
little
of
or no
other
use.
world is just browsing somewhere, but no real life on life. So it doesn't create that burden that will make them to start making career choices that may be. And again, let me say this: missions today is open to every profession. So we're not saying people resign your job, and no. Anybody that has a functional walk with God, is a disciple of Jesus, can hear God about going to practice their profession in a different part of the country, a different part of the world that is gospel needy. But the question is, are parents nurturing those kind of people? Families are the best wombs for producing a new generation that can live with a global perspective.
This is very serious. But I know that the challenge many parents seem to have is they just want safety and a certain future that is a future that is bright,
Yes.
not problematic. You know your children will turn out well, they will marry well, they will settle well, give you grandchildren, and take care of you in old age. So
That's a fairy tale. It doesn't exist. Why do I say it doesn't exist? You can't even keep yourself alive, let alone your children. We have a responsibility as parents, okay, to nurture, to protect, to provide, all of that, yes. But when all is said and done, even you can't keep yourself alive. The question that Christian parents need to ask themselves is, do I trust God with these children? Can I entrust them into God's hands? I look at my children sometimes and I say, okay, if I drop dead today, which is a possibility, I'm not confessing negative,
no, but
but it's a reality that we all have to live.
Because men younger than you have passed
Oh
on.
yeah.
Really.
Just yesterday, my wife and I were visiting a family, somebody related to one of our staff, was just 28 years old. Slept a week ago, didn't wake up. So I live conscious with the reality of my own mortality. And when my kids were younger, I used to be more concerned what will happen to them if
anything
something,
happens.
because I do a lot of travel by air, sometimes on water, sometimes to places that are not very secure. So what happens if I never make it back in one of those? All I keep hearing God saying is that, trust me with their lives. Trust me with their lives. We don't throw them in harm's way. Let me share a story, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Who's the founder of EQUA? SIM EQUA.
Those young boys now.
Those young boys now. Walter Goans, Thomas Kent, Roland Bingham.
Young men.
Yeah. I
In
like
their 20s.
in their 20s, 21, 23, I like
They're
taking
really young.
they were young, extremely young, 21-year-olds sailing the seas 4-5 months
And
to
now
come to-
some of us won't even allow our 21-year-olds
to go next door.
Yeah.
To go and talk to a Muslim family.
Yeah. No, they won't. They won't.
Yeah.
Never. They won't.
So, since this is EQUA TV, I think I have the liberty to take the history of SIM a step backwards. The founder of SIM, I hope I don't get into trouble by saying this,
go ahead.
is not Walter Goans, Thomas Kent, and Roland Bingham. The real founder is Mrs. Margaret Goans,
Yeah.
the mother of Walter. She's the one who received the burden for the Sudan. She's the one who prayed that burden for years, that the 60 to 80 million inhabitants of the Sudan will somehow hear the gospel. And she's the one who pledged her son to go to the Sudan. And she's the one that mobilized him, sowed the seed of missions in the heart of Walter. She's the one that recruited Roland Bingham to join her son to go to the Sudan. She's the one that prayed for them as they went forth. She's the one that sustained them with their prayers. When the news came back through Roland Bingham that her son had died in the Sudan, she's the one who rejoiced and said she gives thanks to God that her son did not waste his life back here in Canada doing what others could have done, but that he sowed his life as a seed for the gospel among the millions of people in the Sudan. And today we are all beneficiaries of the harvest that has come out of that seed. So Mrs. Margaret Goans is a model of the kind of parent that should be raising godly seed for the purposes of God. I'm not saying every parent should be sending their missionaries to dangerous places, their children, to dangerous places, but I'm saying parents that will surrender their children to the purposes of God and trust Him that wherever He leads them. You see, God loves your children more than you do.
Actually, yeah.
But I think we don't trust Him enough with their lives. If we did, we'll be praying over each of them and say, God, whatever you want to do with this one, she is yours, he is yours. But instead, we have a plan for them. And that plan may not be in alignment with His plan for them. So laborers are few because disciples are not being made primarily at home and then in our churches.
Thank you for... If you hadn't gotten this vision you got, they would have ordained you a pastor in one of the churches. Because once you preach well,
I would have
everybody thinks it's pastor.
I would have made a lousy pastor.
Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, okay. So now these issues have been raised about raising. So we'll come back to you,
Okay.
so that parents can understand. So how has it been living the missionary life for you? How has it been?
It's been wonderful. I've had no regrets. I keep telling the young people that I disciple and I mentor, I said, in my journey, I have only one regret. And it's not like a crippling feeling that, because you can't do anything about it. So it's not something that is weighing on me. But let me not call it a regret. I only wish I knew about missions much earlier than I did in my mid-20s. I wish I knew about missions when I was 10. It would have influenced many of the activities I did in my teenage years. It would have influenced the course I studied in the university. It would have influenced many decisions I took in the journey. But anyway, that's history. The last 26 years has been an adventure of working with God and seeing Him, expose me to many things which maybe I may not have experienced if I just, stuck myself in the matrix, this typical Christian church life. Now, not everybody is called to go cross-cultural. I understand that. But everybody is to live with a global vision. However that is expressed. Global vision does not mean going to Chad. It doesn't mean going to Japan. But it means living aware that God's heart is for every tribe, tongue, people group, language, to have a living expression of the gospel incarnated among them. And then God can choose whichever way He wants to use it. He could give you a burden for prayer, could enlarge your finances.
For
giving, not for a bigger
house
lifestyle.
and a bigger car.
Yeah, and a bigger wife.
And a plane.
some people go for a bigger wife.
Or more wives.
Yeah. So when we begin to live with that awareness, it's easier for God to now move our hearts in the direction of His purpose. To sum up that, the answer to your question, I'd just like to say that I've had no regrets. Like Hudson Taylor said, if I had 1,000 lives to live, I'll give them all to China. I think if I had 1,000 more lives to live, I would offer them all to Jesus and ask Him to do whatever He wants to do. If He chooses that I go nowhere, that's fine with me. We are not called to be missionaries.
Called to be
We're called to
disciples.
be disciples, and the hallmark of a disciple is obedience. And so if he says, sit down here until I return, don't go anywhere, my discipleship is to sit down here. If he says, keep moving, keep moving. So,
Okay. So, you're satisfied. Do you feel fulfilled? Because sometimes people feel that missionaries, people who do missions, are people who maybe they have not done so well in life. Other things haven't really worked out well for them. There's no, as we used to say then, NFAs, people with no future ambition. Just they are satisfied with very little and all that and all that.
Yeah.
But you haven't seemed to fit into that mold that people think is wrong. But
I think there are two perspectives to this. First of all, it's some missionaries who have projected that image. You know, they want to create a pity party. They look miserable. And I know missions is warfare. Okay, there are situations that it's tough, but when you project that to people, you send a signal to say, "Don't come here. This is a wrong choice." And regret.
But really, life is a warfare. Really, if we
life
live life
itself,
the way we should
very
live it,
true.
should be warfare.
Very true. Life from beginning to end. A.W. Tozer, one of your husband's favorite authors, he wrote a book titled "Life is a Battleground, Not a Playground." But many of us treat life like a playground. It's a battle. Life, not just mission. Life itself is a battleground. So anyway, some people face so much battle that it wears on them, and then there are people who don't want to be involved in warfare, so it sends them. Some other people have created that image and sent out I've heard bishops and senior pastors, berate missionaries and say, "Oh, these people that just love suffering." I don't think any missionary loves suffering. I think many missionaries, I wouldn't say all, but I think many missionaries love Jesus and are willing to suffer when the reality faces them.
If it calls for
that,
they are good to go.
yes.
And that's what, as you said, that's what a disciple should be.
Essentially, I mean, Philippians 1:29, for to this you were called, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer. And people can expunge that out of their Bible and say,
people barely preach about that.
Yeah, because we've been, tutored not to sing "Me, I no go suffer." Nobody's going to sing "Me, I go suffer." No, nobody wants suffering, but we want Jesus. And if Jesus says, "This is the path, this is the path
that I want,"
that is it. And the good thing about the Great Commission, for me, the best thing about the Great Commission is not the all authority, is not the go, is not the baptize them, it's not the make disciples, it's I will be with you. So whatever I have faced, I am facing, and I will ever face in the path of obedience, he is with me. I would rather suffer and have him with me than have it all and he is not with me. Paul says that I may know him and the power of his resurrection
and the
fellowship
of his suffering.
There is a dimension of fellowship with Jesus that I will never experience until I am willing to suffer with him. And go, why do you use suffering and Jesus? Don't you know he's the resurrected king? He can't suffer.
That's not
so
true.
There's a gospel, I was sharing with my wife some weeks ago, and I said, we don't seem to have grasped the theology of suffering in the church. We are not preaching this is not bad news. It's good news. If you do a study on the word suffering in the New Testament especially, you would see that it's very difficult in the New Testament to study the word suffering and not find somewhere around it the word glory. I challenge any Christian to do this study in the New Testament, in the Gospels, in the epistles, in Revelation. You will see suffering. Just read the context, the pretext, the post-text. Sometimes within the same verse, you will see glory. So we want the glory,
But don't want the suffering.
But we don't
you don't
want
like
the
the
suffering.
process.
Yes, we don't want the
that's-
process, but we want the results.
Yeah.
And that's a facade. It doesn't work like that.
Okay. Still on this because now it's on you. So, how have you been able to take care of your family? How has how have your needs been met? Okay, let's look at the material needs.
Yes.
And then also that satisfaction that, okay, as a man, I hear men want to feel
Yeah.
that they have impacted their world, they have made a difference, and they have been able to take care of their family. So
Yeah.
how has that been for you
Um,
as a missionary?
yes, as a missionary. One of the things that I initially battled with when I knew God was saying, now lay down everything and come with me. We had a very interesting conversation early in the call. He asked me a question, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, this was just shortly after youth service, after he had exposed me to all these things, but I was still pursuing my ambition. What do you want to do with your life? I said, I want to make money.
You wanted to do graphics,
Animations,
cartoons, animation.
yes,
I remember.
yes. I had
Yeah.
even gotten admission to study animations in the US. This was as far back as 1998, 19. And my plan was to go study that. I had gotten a school that admitted me in Atlanta, then come back to Africa and pioneer the animations industry and make lots of money. That was my my ambition. So when he asked me that question, I said, I want to make money. And he said, what do you want to do with money? I said, I want to take care of my parents. When they are old, I would like to, build them a very nice house and take care of my parents. They've sacrificed so much to put myself and my siblings through good schools. I've seen the sacrifice my parents made. So I want to take care of them in their old age. And God said, let me ask you a question. I said, what is it? He said, since you were born, who has been taking care of your parents? I said, it's you. He said, okay, did I tell you that I have resigned from playing that role? I said, no. He said, you go and do my work. I will take care of your parents. See, I don't trust him. I'm not quite sure that he can. So I did nothing. I didn't fully surrender. 2 weeks later, he came again and said, what do you want to do with your life? I said, I want to make money. He said, what do you want to do with money? I said, I want to print Bibles. I want to send money so they can plant churches.
Spiritual things now.
So you are trying to manipulate God. God said, I don't need your money. I want your life.
Wow.
And that ended the argument for me. So I began to wonder, so how do missionaries actually survive? To cut the long story short, the Lord led me into a mission organization, which I served with for about 17 years. A couple of years into that, serving with that organization.
For 17 years.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, about 17 years, from 99 to 2015.
Wow.
About, yeah, 98, 99, yes, to 2015. So anyway, so we were trained on just how to trust God, how to believe God for your needs. God is the source, people are channels. And so over the years, those two things have been very important to me. Maintain your connection to God as source, and then maintain your connection with people as channels. God will use whomever he wants to use. So in one word, it's relationship. You cultivate your relationship with God. You cultivate your relationship with people. And so God has been very gracious over the years. He's used several partners, yourself inclusive. Your family has been very supportive to us over the years, and several other families in different places who have come to. Initially, it wasn't clear what we were doing. People didn't quite know what we were doing, but eventually, I think they came to trust that, okay, maybe there's a call here. And so there are seasons when, like everybody, I think, I don't know, I've never really worked in a typical, I've never earned a salary in my life because I was fresh out of campus after youth service, straight into missions. So I don't know what it's like for salary earners, but I think everybody has their ups and down seasons.
Yeah, and right now in the country, it's down season for most
almost
people.
everybody, yeah. But the summary of my testimony is that God has been faithful. If I start sharing testimonies or stories with you now, you will need like 5 episodes of this program because I've seen God come through in miraculous ways. I've seen God come through in ordinary ways. I've seen God come through in unexpected ways, channels that it's, for example, when we're in Kenya, the currency exchange between the naira and the Kenya shillings in the last 10 years has just continued to slide. The naira has taken a beating. And so when people support us, 95% of our support comes from friends and family in Nigeria. So when they send us support because of the depreciating value of the naira, the assumption is that it won't be able to meet all your needs on the field, because when we first went to Kenya, it was 1 shilling to 2 naira. And then it became 1 shilling to 5 naira. Right now it's 1 shilling to 13 naira.
Wow.
So while we're there, you would receive what looks like a lot of money to take care of things, bills, ministry, expenses, rent, food, children needs and all that. But once you convert it into the Kenyan shilling, it just drops. Okay. But in the midst of that, we did not lack, because he is a faithful God. So my closing remark in that regard is that if God calls you, which he has called all of us in some measure, he has promised that I will never leave you. I will be with you till the end of the age. So the question now is, do I trust him to meet my needs? And do I love the people that he has bonded me with enough to journey with them and allow them to obey him as well in being partners that are faithful? Yes.
Thank you, Mark, so much for sharing. You've told
My
us
pleasure.
to leave this place. Well, not that harshly, but
Yeah.
they said it's time to go.
Yes,
So
yes.
thank you so much for sharing.
It's my pleasure.
God bless you. Big time.
Thank you.
And viewers, I hope we've heard how we can raise mission-minded people in our home, but it has to start with us as parents and then with our kids, so that we'll be involved in this plan of God. So most importantly, let's lay ourselves out for God and let God do whatever he wishes to do with us. Can be called to go to the field, can be called to stay at home praying, sending money, visiting, and doing all we need to do as God leads us to move this gospel forward. So thank you for not touching that dial and being with us till the very end. God bless you until we come your way again. Same time, same place at the Living Room Equa Television. God bless you as you become, or you continue to be, real disciples. Bye.